Well, welcome to A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. I'm Anton van and my co-host is Ben Liebenberg. This is the podcast where we explore the journey of people who have left everything familiar behind to build a new life in a new land. Together we'll delve into stories of migration, identity and belonging, what people carried with them, what they left behind, and what they discovered along the way. Whether you're an immigrant yourself, thinking about starting over, or just curious about the stories behind the suitcase, you're definitely in the right place. So let's dive into today's discussion. In episode 1, Ben and I explored a lot about where we came from, who we were, and prior to coming and immigrated to Australia, and we had some really interesting stories. If you want to find out about how Ben put highlights in his wife Louise's hair, then please go and listen to episode 1, because then you'll find that out. But Ben, in this conversation that we want to have, we want to take it a little bit further. The idea of this episode is to talk a little bit about when we landed here, so to speak, and what we experienced, and the things that were challenging for us, and perhaps also the things that weren't challenging, and how we experienced that, and perhaps tell that story. So maybe I can start by asking you, I think that the things that sometimes when we immigrate, we don't think about them, right? So it's like our accent, or it's like our emotional separation because we're suddenly so far away. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Firstly, hello Anton.
Hello Ben.
It's good to be here. Yeah, can you believe it? We're doing episode 2. Didn't think we'll get here, to be quite honest, but all right, let's roll. Yeah, I think thinking back of it now, and I think for content as well, I've come over here, we've been here 25 years, as you can tell from my accent.
No, I can't. You still sound very South African.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have to think back a little bit on some of that stuff, but I do remember, certainly in terms of looking the same and going everywhere and you feel like the same, and then everybody else there, people will do, just take accent for instance, people do pick up your accent, and that immediately is a differentiator. That's something that makes you different and something that makes you feel like you're from outside. And I suppose that's no different to a lot of other minority or other groups that feel that they're outside because they've got something different about them and something that stands out. So probably just not unique to us. I presume it's unique to a lot of people all over the world, but yeah, that was one of the things, certainly. There's many others. Humor is one of them that we picked up. You go somewhere and you try and tell a joke and it just falls flat, and you should realize that, okay, people's sense of humor is not always exactly the same, or things that's funny, or that peculiarities are not always the same. Yeah, so it's, in a nutshell, I think it's the same but also different. I suppose everybody experiences different. We were very lucky that when we came over here, my friend John that I referred to on the previous podcast, we were lucky enough that when we came over, we actually stayed at their house for the first month, just because we had nothing here yet and we were still waiting for a container to come over. Yeah. Fortunately, I was working in the same town as him, and I must say that was such a help for us. I actually think back of it now, and people that must do it without that little bit of help and infrastructure, it must be so much more difficult, because that was genuinely a tremendous help for us. And I'm thinking about it now. What about you guys? You obviously had a bit of family as well, so that obviously helped as well.
Well, yes and no, and you're right. And so mine was a little bit more recent. So this is our 8th year in Australia. Feels like a lifetime, really. We came across like the things that you're mentioning, and so it doesn't matter where you go. When you start speaking, then most often people will say to you, are you South African? Or they say, are you Dutch? Or they'd say that to you. And it's not bad or an obstacle or anything like that. It's just that now, okay, so you are not from here. That's what they're saying. And so then you say, yes, you are. And then most often people will have a really good thing to say about that. And then, of course, you'd get the odd Kiwi. And then they say, I'm not talking to you. I say, why? No, because we can't talk rugby at the moment. So it's when we arrived here, that was easy for them. Now it's much more harder. And so these are the kind of differences, but also similarities that you have. The interesting thing with the accent is that, I don't know if you've seen that, but often people will mix up South African accents with the Kiwi accents because there's some similarities there in terms of how they pronounce the words. But that was just something that you get used to and you live with, and it's not a major issue. The interesting thing about an accent is that you don't hear it yourself, so you don't know. You have no idea. But I think that probably one of the bigger things that one don't think about is two things that I found. The one was the time zone difference. You go to Australia, you are far away from most everything that you know. So everything that you know, whether it is in, let's say, Europe or, for instance, in South Africa, you might be on the same, the latitude, Ben? You might be on the same latitude, so the weather and so on is similar and feels the same, but you're 8 or 9 hours time zone difference from South Africa. So if you want to speak to somebody in South Africa, it's got to be very purposeful, right? So you've got to either wake them up early in the morning, speak to them late in the afternoon, and then you want to just say something to somebody and you can't, you have to wait 8 hours. And so it's those kind of things that one experience when you come across that you don't, that's not in your suitcase. You don't bring that across. It's not in your kind of mindset that you have, the time zone difference, the accent, and you experience that. And one might think, oh, that's not a big deal. Because with that time zone difference becomes the emotional separation, because you're separated suddenly from everything that you knew, everybody that you knew. If you have not traveled extensively overseas, for instance, Ben, then that is a big shock to have that emotional separation. Like, for instance, and then otherwise I'll speak the whole time, but like, for instance, you'd go into a shop and then maybe you'd see a South African product like Millipap. You'd see that and then you'd get sad. It's okay. And then we are here. Yes, we can actually buy it and make it, and it's going to be quite nice. Yeah, so Ben.
What was quite emotional for me, actually, when we came over, and I can't remember, we were in Adelaide or Melbourne somewhere, and we were in a shopping centre, and there were guys, Cape Coloureds, obviously from Cape Town.
Yeah.
And I heard them speaking, and they were speaking Afrikaans to each other.
Yes.
And just hearing him was absolutely amazing. I'd never thought I'll felt like that. But yeah, that was really something that was actually quite, it was something, just hearing it. Yeah, I just went up to them, said hello. Fantastic to speak to them. It's like my long lost brother that I found somewhere in a shopping centre.
You're right, we've done that too. The other interesting thing is that you do get, I've seen, and this is a teachable point here. So I've seen people coming here from South Africa and then they think nobody understands them when they walk around and they have something bad to say about something around them or some people or something, and then you hear them speaking Afrikaans. But what we forget is there are 200,000 South Africans in Australia. It's the second largest group of South Africans outside of South Africa other than the UK. So there are plenty of them. Yeah, so I've got to be careful about what you say and when you speak, because there's enough people that'll hear you.
But if you've been here 25 years, the other way around is true as well. We've gone back and then Louise will start talking in Afrikaans to me about somebody, and I go, hey, listen, these people can actually understand you. I don't think you can get away with that one.
Yeah. But moving forward a bit, I think that you get in here, things are different, as we said before. We don't have to harp on that. But now your next job is to establish yourself.
Hang on. One thing I want to ask you before we move on.
Yep.
And something that you mentioned once.
Are you going to put me on the spot here?
Yeah, that we must ask our guests. What did you have in your suitcase when you came over?
The emotional things or the practical things?
I think both, yeah.
Yeah, so I think practical... I was setting up my new practice here, or my new business. I left a corporate and I left Dubai and I came here. So the primary things in my suitcase, I wasn't concerned about clothes and stuff like that. I was concerned about all my electronic equipment and then, of course, my cameras. I'm a kind of really avid photographer. So my computer equipment and all my laptops and stuff like that, because that's my intellectual property. That's where all my stuff sits. And then my cameras. Mm. That was the practical side in my business. The emotional thing in my suitcase was a big deal in the sense that I left the corporate world at the end of 2017. I was in a pretty decent position. And as I said in the first podcast, the primary reason of coming across to Australia is because our son was here and we wanted to be here too. But in order to do that, I had to give up the corporate career and set up my practice. But I always wanted to do that. It wasn't a thing that I was worried about in the sense of I didn't want to do it, but I was incredibly nervous. You can imagine you're leaving a corporate career, you are coming to a country where you basically know nobody, you have no network, you've got to try and establish yourself, you've got to make a living. You know that whatever you bring out of South Africa in terms of financial means is divided by 10, 11 or 12, depending on when you came across. So emotionally for me, it was bearing very heavily on me that I'm coming here, I need to establish myself. We already by that time gave Anton an education, so by then he was working for himself, but I still needed to establish myself here because we needed to make a living. There was no ways that we could come here and retire because you just never have enough money. So if you ask me what is my biggest emotional baggage that I brought, it was that drama for me to come and set myself up, and I was worried about that.
Yeah. And I think that rings true for a lot of people. I think a lot of people can relate to it. There's obviously a few people that I've spoken to that were fortunate enough that did not have that worry, so that came here. And especially, I think, being fortunate where they came for an established job, where the work got them here, paid for them to be here, they had the skills to sell here, they wanted here, didn't cost them any money really to come over here. There's still emotional baggage that we either leave behind or bring with us. And we spoke about that a little bit last time as well. So mine's interesting. So my suitcase was filled with shoes.
Were you worried about the size of shoes here?
I don't know why, but I had to bring obviously work shoes, then casual shoes, and then my running shoes. And then I thought, but I also need golf shoes. And just in case I need to bring my rugby shoes. I still remember going through customs and they asked to unpack our bag. And then we unpacked, there's just this bag full of shoes. And about 10 pairs of shoes for me, and Louise had 2.
It should be the other way around.
Exactly. So I just thought I need to cover all my bases. You never know if somebody invites you for a game of golf, you need to be ready.
But that's interesting if you say that. Come to think of it, we do this podcast and this is the piece of it's in the suitcase, and the one that you talk about is the emotional baggage that we have. But also, now that you say this, I've said it's also very much reflective of your value system. You know, your value system, you know, what is important to you. So it was important to you to bring over your kind of the life that you were leading before, right? Whether it was playing golf or was running or rugby or whatever the case might be, that you were bringing over, perhaps too old for the rugby part, but at least the golf and the running and all of the gym and so on. So that was important for you to bring that, and it makes you feel safe, if I can put it that way. And so mine was similar, right? So I needed to have my equipment around me and I needed to have my cameras around me. That was my value system that was important to me. So that's interesting. I wonder, when we speak to people now that we have a little bit of a different idea about the suitcase, which is beyond the emotional part, is also very reflective of your value system. So that's a fantastic question to ask, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly, we also said part of the reason why we want to do this pod is probably helping people that's either coming over or want to come over or just came over.
Yeah.
So a bit of advice I think that I would have enjoyed if somebody told me, and I'm not saying this works for everybody, but if I must do this again, I tell you what, I'm not bringing over a container.
Why not, Ben? I'd like to know.
No, there's nothing, it's all material stuff really in there. You've just asked me the question, what, is it not like they haven't got shoes in Australia? It goes for everything. Kettle here, they've got everything you need. They've got TVs here. You can just pack up the stuff that's important to you, your photos, your close belongings. And I see a lot of the guys that started working with me now that just came over a few months ago, and they just got a part of a container. It cost them very little. And they sold all this stuff over there, and you just take the money and you start over here and you buy it from scratch. Number one, it takes you months to change all the plugs. All the plugs are different. It's just, in hindsight, just for me, and again, everybody's story is different, but for me, I wouldn't do that. I'll just leave the stuff behind and come over as light as possible and bring over the stuff that's sentimental or got sentimental value, but anything that's just material stuff, I'll just leave behind.
And it's an interesting point, Ben, but I tell you that you say this and there will be a lot of people say to you, you haven't spoken to my wife about that. When I was in my corporate role, part of the things that we did was obviously I was overseas, and part of what you have to do in my role that we had to handle expats coming across. And so that story is true in a sense that when people go overseas, it's like they have to take everything with them, because if they don't, they'll feel completely exposed and unsafe. And I think if you look at it back now, to ask you all the stuff that you brought across, you probably didn't use half of them. You're 100% right.
No.
But the truth is, it's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
It's not a practical thing, unfortunately, and it could be so much cheaper. You're right.
But actually, and John said it to us, he said, I think it was him in any case, when they came over, obviously you come over and then your container comes a few months later. Yeah. And for them it was so good because of like Christmas, you open all the stuff and everything arrives like a Christmas box that comes in. And the one thing that was very comforting for them is then just the familiarity. You see everything in there. It's your couch, it's your bed, it's your stuff. The feeling of, goodness, it's my stuff. That's right. No, I get that, and I think there's a lot of power in that fact that you bring your own stuff with you, and it's something at least that you got of your own. But from a practical sense, as you say, you're not going to use the stuff. Half our stuff never made it out the box. But yeah, it had some emotional value, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think about, before we move into a little bit about what we did next, but I think about when you are in a new country, and I'm sure that those who listen to the podcast who've been here for a while will resonate with that a lot, is that when you initially come across, and it's hard in the beginning, Ben, because back to the suitcase thing, right? Most people have left somebody and some things behind. And there's some things that you can't do here that you used to be able to do there. Some things that you can't buy here that you used to get. I mentioned the issue about the grocery shopping, but then the big deal about people. So now you leave somebody behind. It could be a mother or a father. It could be somebody that can't come across, or it could be kids that you leave behind, or kids that leave parents behind, and it could be that situation, and it's other family. And then what inevitably happens, and thankfully I know that in my case it wasn't the situation, and I asked you that specific question last time, it wasn't in yours either, but there will be people that don't support you coming across, that will be angry with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And so now you're settling in this new country. Now you've got to deal with this emotional stuff. And then on top of that, you're 8 hours apart. You're trying to set yourself up. If you're lucky enough to become here from a company, that's great. You settle in terms of the financial stuff. But all the emotional stuff, they can't buy for you. Is that how you see it, Ben?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's exactly how I see it. And that's the loss of that suitcase. You've got everything in one suitcase and you're moving away, and you're leaving that behind. So yeah, definitely, I can definitely relate to that. That's how we felt to extent as well. Yeah. But on the other balance then, there's a lot to look forward to, and there's a lot of positive stuff then that balance it out, because you would think to yourself, gee, if it's that hard, why would you ever do it?
Exactly. And so if you say, what are your highlights of being here, Ben? What is it that you say? And I'm not asking for a comparison. I'm just asking, what do you enjoy doing here?
I think the main event in our lives that happened over here is that our kids were born here. Our household is now 50-50. We've got 2 Aussies and 2 South Africans in the house.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's interesting. And it's interesting to see your kids grown up as Australians. This is their country. We still go back to South Africa, visit family, friends. But for my kids, this is their country. This is where they're from. They relate to. This is what they see themselves. We see ourselves as well to extent, but we've got that roots and that belonging also with Africa that you probably will never lose.
No.
From a highlight point of view, it's definitely having the opportunity to raise my kids here and see the opportunities that I've got, and how good this country is for people raising a family, having young kids, the opportunities involved. And for myself as well, I was fortunate I left South Africa in a time when there weren't that many restrictions. They were coming in at the time, and it was more and more difficult. Jobs were allocated based on race, not on ability and capability always, but on a long history of that, wrong or rightly, before that as well. When we came here, it was much more, people just looked at you and see what you are capable of doing, and because of that you got opportunities. So from a more building a life view, that's definitely one of the highlights for me. I mean, from a social side, it's the same thing. It's the social connections you make, it's the friends you make, new friends, new understanding, exploring not just the country and the beauty of the country itself, the people and the people around and the people that you work with and that you live with. And for a major part of it, life is relatively easy here. It's a safe place. You feel safe. You feel your kids are safe. I've never felt unsafe since I've been here.
Yeah.
I've never felt threatened since I've been here. So that's just something that I'm actually struggling with these days to comprehend, that you have to think of that during your daily basis. You know, still today we leave home and then we'll be down the road and somebody will ask if we lock the door, not even lock the door, sometimes even just close the door. And we'll find out that we haven't done it and we'll go, oh, it's all right, we'll come back. It's only going to be 2 hours and then we'll be back, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, okay, not everybody will do that. But anyway, and what you're saying is actually this. I'm hearing also that one should never underestimate what you get out of coming across to, and we're talking about Australia specifically because that's where we are, because there's a lot of things that other people could complain about or things that one can feel unhappy about, but there's this underlying things like you're mentioning that you forget. And I remember coming across, and I was in my business for 2 years, and it's like a real struggle, of course, setting up a new practice, trying to find people that will buy the stuff that you'll sell, so to speak. And then COVID hit. And then suddenly we were in a situation, and we were staying at the time in Melbourne, we were locked down. So for those who followed COVID in Australia know that Melbourne was the epicenter of being locked down. So we were just locked down, and there we were. And I've only been in Australia for just 2 years. Just on 2 years. And I got support from the government to see me through that time in my newly formed business. And where does that happen? And I was thinking back about that. I don't mind paying tax when those sort of things happen because the support is out there. Other than the obvious things, you feel much more safe. You don't have those kind of worries. It was these other things that I never expected would happen. And so therein lies the thing. You think you are different and you feel different. But when it comes to the bread and butter issues about you dealing your stuff in Australia, you are Australian, right?
Yeah, very much. And I suppose that's, on the lighter side, that's probably my yin and yang about Australia, is the tax and the amount of tax you pay.
Yep.
Because it's so very high. But then on the other hand, it's so good to see that your tax money is well spent and it goes to the wrong place. Look, I've often said it, when you get here, you think it's fantastic, and then 20 years later, I'm just complaining like all the South African, our tax money is wasted on all this nonsense. But I think one must always keep it real and then compare it or see it in comparison with the rest of the world, and especially where we came from. Then you can appreciate that, look, the way that they spend your tax money and the way that the infrastructure and services are maintained just makes life easy.
So let's talk a little bit about your time here and your career and building yourself and getting paid and working and so on. And so really, I think that I don't want to necessarily bore everybody about exactly what I did. I'm more after, if I ask you, Ben, about what are the things that you did that make you survive and make a living and get you to stay? What were the things that you were doing, navigating your way through in the beginning specifically and in later years?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to recognize and understand that things do work a little bit different here and people do think slightly different here. So you have to adapt to that. There's certain sensitivities that you need to recognize and you have to acknowledge, and just the way people do things and what's expected from you, how people conduct themselves, those kind of things. And it's not, as you say, it's not better and it's not worse. It's just a little bit different. Yeah. One of the things I learned is that, and I actually quite like that about the Australians, they can understate. Unbelievable how they can understate. Except maybe when it comes to sport. Yes.
You're right about that.
But so you'll speak to a guy at work and he'll go, oh no, I had a bit of a drama, but nothing, yeah, it's all right, all good. Yeah, just a little bit, and then you'll find out what is it. No, I was diagnosed with cancer, then I had to go for chemo, and then you call that a little bit, and you just go, if us in South Africa, you just would have been, man, you cannot believe what happened to me, and it's people just say it differently.
Yeah, it is. And that's interesting that you say this, but talk a little bit about you as a business person and the things that you did to get ahead and do your thing, because I think that, I know a little bit about your history. You worked full time, and then at some point you had your own business, you were a consultant, and navigating through that, because it takes a particular person with a particular set of courage, if I can put it that way, to deal with all these things, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably different people's in life. Some people are very structured. They plan their life. They know exactly what they're going to do 20 years ahead. They knew what they were going to do when they were 10 years old. I'm probably exactly the opposite. I remember, as we spoke about in our last episode, when I left school, I had no clue what I wanted to do. Absolutely no clue. So everybody said, yeah, go to the army. That's the one place where you mature very quickly. You'll come out of the army, you'll have direction, all these things. And I came out of the army and I knew less what I wanted to do. And it's been a bit like that for me all my life. And even just coming over here, as I said last time, we just came over here for an adventure. We weren't sure if we were going to stay here. And we never immigrated. It was just, we just came over for a contract, and then life happened. So I suppose to answer your question, career-wise, I didn't really plan it that well. I never strategically sat down and planned it. I just looked at opportunities, and as it came up, I basically took them and just rolled with the punches. But it takes time. Number one, you have to recognize and acknowledge that you're not going to start at the top. And when you come over here, it doesn't matter what you did in South Africa. It means absolutely nothing, and it doesn't matter where you come from. You have to build your credibility. You have to prove that you can do the job. None of the stuff that you've ever done in your life means anything here. So that's important. And I think especially people coming over, they can't expect people here to really have an appreciation of what they did over there, and nor should you.
That's an interesting thing that you said, and it's true, that you think that you come across with all the qualifications and experience in the world and so on. I think that's true for getting you here. That allows you to come here in the first place. Unless you come on an aged care parent visa or something like that, if you come here, you want to make a living through a business or through employment or anything like that, then you had to have a certain level of in what you've done before to get here. But once you're here, it's very different in that sense, because you have to be prepared to take a step sideways or backwards, as you say, before you can go forward.
Very much so.
And if you're not going to do that, then you're going to struggle. And then the thing about what I love about South Africans, and what is the strong point that they have, and is also the weak point, we know that strong points are weak points, is the fact that South Africans say something in the way that they want to say it. So if we are clear and straight, and you touched on that a little bit, and Australians are very different. They don't say it like that. You have to learn a different way of speaking, which sometimes feel a little bit roundabout. Perhaps you should do this, or maybe you need to think about it that way. In South Africa, say, do this.
Yeah.
You need to go and deliver that. And so you've got to learn to do that, because if you, for instance, bring that language across, because that's the whole cultural thing. You bring the language across that you worked in, and you bring it across to Australia, and you try and work with a team, then that's just not going to work. And you might not have it in a direct response, but there will be different ways that there would be a response.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, just thinking about it now and thinking back a bit, is that the life here in general, and we spoke about this last time, but just in general and also in the workplace, it's much more egalitarian, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Even though there's definitely a hierarchy, and people know who the boss is, and there is that underlying respect, there's a different way. Everybody's allowed to be even to extent more so than in South Africa. You can't expect to have that authority just because of your position. It's a different approach that I found. In any case, I don't know, other people might have found it different, but there's certainly a different subtlety and a different approach to it.
Yeah. So, thinking about my time when we arrived and what were the things that I did here, everything was very different. But at the same time, I was very keen to set up my practice here. I started doing authoring and publishing books and trying to get to communities and so on, I realized that the one thing, what you don't want to do when you come here is to only mix with South Africans. It's important that you mix with South Africans, but don't only mix with South Africans. I think that's an important thing, because you will never understand the cultural differences if you don't mix. But also, what Australians want to know from you is that if you're in a particular area or trying to get work in a particular area, you're in for the long haul. They don't want to know that you're jumping around. And then things that you realize in Australia is that if you're in Melbourne, you want to try and get as a consultant work in Sydney. That doesn't work that well. You need to be in Sydney to get work in Sydney and Melbourne. You go to Melbourne, it's like weird, but that's how it is, and you learn that. So for the most part, people are incredibly generous. They let you in. In South Africa, you're used to bring people to your house and have a braai. In Australia, that doesn't work like that. You'll go to a pub or you go to a restaurant and you do that. But they're incredibly generous, and a lot of good ties are made over quite a few Chardonnays.
Yeah, I suppose the same principle in South Africa, but the way of entertaining is very much different. And I think maybe it's got to do something with the safety and the, I don't know, it's just cultural maybe. Since I can remember, I can't remember ever going out as a kid or that to anybody with my mum and dad to the pub. But we barbecued every weekend at somebody's house or at our own house or somewhere. But yeah, certainly that's very different.
Yeah, the bolos. Just take that example. We don't have that concept at all, and you come here and you find out all the bolos, which is areas where people can get together and have a good meal with a lot of people, and it's not super expensive, and it's very nice, and it is just packed all the time. It's very popular.
Yeah, absolutely.
But talking a little bit further about, so from my perspective, the things that I did here, so I just tried to build my career. The unintended thing that I didn't plan that way that happened was that a lot of the people that took my work when I was a consultant, that took me on board, were of course not in Australia, because when I arrived here I didn't have work rights, and so we still had sort out permanent residency and all that sort of stuff with visas and so on. So a lot of my clients were not in Australia, and they were outside of Australia, and so it went on. And the thing that I've learned is that it is incredibly important to build a network in Australia. It would be like any place, but if you think about where you've grown up, many people that you can call up, right? Many people that you can speak to if you need to, or get advice from, or say, I've got an offer, I want you to have a look at this proposal I'm making, so on. In Australia, you have nobody.
Yeah.
You literally have nobody, and so you're also in that situation that you've got to build this network, and then they want to know that you, as I say, in for the long haul. Would you agree with that, Ben? Is that sort of what you found as well?
Yeah, I think so. Like you say, it doesn't matter where you go to in the world, and personal connections is what ultimately counts. When it doesn't matter where it is and how you make them, those are important. But just from my point of view, you don't have to force it either. No. The one thing I found coming over here is there's sometimes a subtlety about it that you just have to be relaxed about it. I think don't have too many expectations. Go with an open mind and try and be relaxed about it. I know it's not always that easy, especially if you come over and you have to make a living and that kind of thing. But I think ultimately if you're genuine about it, people will pick that up, and it doesn't matter where you come from. And we spoke a lot about the accent thing, because it's funny that I found it in the places I've worked. People recognize that first thing when you start speaking for the first 2 weeks, but then they get used to it, and then that's just you. Then that goes away, and you just become another one of the team.
No, and it's right. We've got wonderful friends here now, and we've built that up, and it's the same. And I think that thinking about, so what advice would I give to people coming across? Maybe I should start with this, and I'd love to hear from you too, Ben. But the thing is that, so what would I say? I think the one advice that I said earlier, don't just stick with people that you know, because you're never going to get outside of your comfort zone, and you're only going to talk about the same things. You're never going to learn other things. And so maybe there are other things that you would never do, but you'll learn about them, right? So even now today, I only understand half of the news when the news is on, or the politics. I just don't understand it. And then I say that to an Australian, and they say, we don't either. So that's the one thing. Then learn some of the words. Mate is a very important word to use, because it's like you belong, and it's very easy to say to somebody, thank you,
really?
mate. Yep.
Oh, mate's the word you use when you don't know somebody's name.
So I think that's the first piece of advice, as I say. Don't just assimilate yourself with people that you know. And I think the other thing that you should think about, and maybe not that obvious, but from a financial point of view, it's really important that you try and get yourself into buying a property here in Australia, because there's an incredibly good social system in Australia that looks after aged people, right? And if you haven't gathered up all the superannuation here in Australia, then you won't get enough pension out of the government to pay your rent as well. So the important thing is get yourself into a property. That would be my advice. It's one of the first things that you should think about doing. And if you have the means to do that, it's an important thing to do. So those two things, I'd say, is quite important. What are you thinking, Ben?
Yeah, no, I agree. But as we know, it's not always that easy because the rules are a little bit different. The expectations of what to put down as a deposit and things like that, it's fairly high. It takes time. And again, I saw it with one of the guys started working where I work recently. And you can just see it in their faces. They look at the rent and they look at the prices, and it's quite daunting. But it's like everything, you just have to give it a bit of time and you get used. So don't stress about these things right in the beginning. We all stress about it. You just have to give it time. You just have to give it time so that it can roll over. You do build it up. It does happen. Just be patient and just work at it. Just be mindful of it, as you say, and have it as a goal and set it there, but don't make it too big a thing.
No, that's true. And I think once you understand the rules, how to rent or how to buy, then you can work towards it. That gives you the ability to settle in, right? So it's those things that if you get a nice place or you rent a nice place and nobody bothers you, and it really works pretty well. And then I think the other piece of advice that I would give is that there's 100 people that will tell you what to do before you arrive here. My suggestion is that take that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Because you need to make your own way. And your road is going to be your road and it's going to be nobody else's road. And you are going to be here with your family if you're lucky enough to have a family, and your kids if you have them. And you're going to make your own path. And so sometimes it's not what other people say, it's how it works for you.
Yeah, that's what I talk about, expectations. And it goes good and bad. Some people have fantastic expect fantastic experiences, others not so much, but everybody's individual. Everybody has their own story and everybody will experience it differently. And I think part of why we do this podcast, because we just spoke to each other about how we experienced it. But I suppose one of the reasons why we started the podcast is because we wanted to hear from other people what they think, how they experienced it, and what was their journey, and how is it different than ours. And that's, I suppose, now that we've got ourselves out the way, which I'm thankful for.
It was hard work getting you to speak, Ben.
And now we can explore the road with other people and get their stories, and it'll be interesting to compare notes and see how they feel about coming over here and their experience and their suitcase and what was in their suitcase, and also their journey and their story. So hence the name of our podcast. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is just listening to those stories and telling them and passing on the lessons learned to other people that might think of coming already here or just started or just having a laugh because they went through the same thing. And hopefully there's some people there that's never immigrated that can resonate to the stories and go, yep, now maybe I haven't immigrated, but I've moved from Queensland down to Victoria, and it's a bit similar.
Yeah, people say that. You need a passport for that. So, yes, you're right, Ben. And I think that, so this podcast is not about us, but we wanted to lay the groundwork for that, to say we also have a story. We're very happy where we are and immigrated. Nothing goes perfect. There's still a lot of challenges that we face all the time. But we've built ourselves a little place. It's where we are. And we just went for dinner last night with Ben and you, and Louise were there, and Leanne, and then a couple of other friends. And it was just great. And so those are the things that you treasure. But I think for what we want to do here is, as you say, we want to get other people to come in to tell their story, because I think it's important for people to hear that. So I think one of the purpose of that is to say, I'm in Australia, I'm here, I'm struggling a little bit, and here somebody said something that I can resonate with, and I say, oh, that's how they did it. Oh, okay, maybe I should do it like that. Or somebody, as you say, that sits not here yet, but aspire to come out and say they make it, look possible. If you can do it, then I can possibly do it. And I think that's what we were trying to do. And so hopefully that'll work.
Or maybe even just saying it is difficult, but you're not the only one. Everybody got their own story to people. They all got their challenges, and it's no different than just life, whether you immigrated or not. Everybody on the surface might look like it's all going well, but everybody's got their own things in their own lives going on that they have to deal with. I presume it just gets under the microscope so much more if you immigrate and going through that process.
Yeah, and I think in closing, I'd say for my part is that I'm not a person that regrets things, but I do not regret this at all. I think it was fantastic. My son has got a great job. He's doing well. He's married. And I suppose this is timely to say they are expecting their first child soon. So we'll have the first generation Van der Walt in Australia if all goes well.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you. So this is the end of this podcast. Thank you very much for those who've listened and stayed with us during this time. This is our story, Ben and I, and so we will be reaching out and start inviting guests. And I think this is super exciting. We've tested this podcast with a few people and we got some great response. So hopefully we can keep it up.
Yeah, now for the interesting part. All the interesting people that's going to come up now.
Right. So thank you, Ben.
All right. Cheers.
We'll speak soon.